A quick slideshow, only 8 slides, just to give anybody who's interested a summary of UK government public finances for the current year. All the information that's presented here is from the Office for Budget Responsibility November 2023 report, so everything in here is accurate and from government. By way of a summary, here's a slide, quite useful because it basically shows for the current year the current amount of spending that's going to happen in government, 1.2 trillion, a trillion being 1,000 billion if you like, versus receipts of 1.139 trillion or 1,139 billion. And as you can see, there's a bit of a deficit there, 87 billion. In other words, the government are going to spend 87 billion pound more than they're going to take in. This is interesting because it shows the percentage of national income. So national income is every penny that's earned by individuals and organisations. So that would be up here somewhere if it was 100%. And as you can see, a fair slug of that, 40%, is taken back by government by way of taxes and corporation taxes, etc., etc. So if we look at it, we just put some numbers against that. The thing I want to draw out here is if the equivalent that we raise from everybody that's able to provide receipts to the government in the UK via businesses or individually equates to about £39,000 per household. We look on the other side, we can see that the spending amount of 1.226 billion equates to about 42,000 per household. So you can already see that we're spending more than we're earning as a household, if we want to use that analogy. And there's the 87 billion pound deficit that we talked about. This is quite alarming and quite interesting. So that 87 billion obviously is a debt, and that debt is added to an existing debt which is already at 2.7 trillion. And we'll look at a slide later on just to sort of bring that out graphically, but basically these are the numbers. We earn 39,000, we spend 42, we've got a deficit, and we add that to a debt that we already have as a UK household of 96,000. So quite graphic really in terms of the state of the finances overall. So if we look at income in a bit more detail, those receipts that we looked at earlier, not surprisingly you can see income taxes there, VAT, corporation tax, council tax, etc., etc. And that's what goes to make up the purse, if you like, for the government in order to be able to spend. Look at that in a bit more detail. We've just discussed some of the big things there. Taxes equivalent to 89% of the total revenue that the government takes in each year. Yeah, and that's just basically saying VAT is the next biggest one, 176 billion. So when government are talking about spending over here, this is the picture really in terms of, well, what you're going to do. You're going to increase the deficit, or you're going to increase the receipts by increasing income tax or VAT or whatever. Look at the spending side of things, back to that slide there. We know we spend more each year than we take in, and spending, not surprisingly, sort of things that we'd expect to see there. Health and social care is obviously huge. Education, pensions, universal credit, other welfare. So you can see where the money's going out, and then there's defence and there's some public services spend there as well. That'll be for schools and roads, etc., etc. So if we look at the two in balance there, we can see spending on the left hand side and we can see receipts on the right hand side, so you can get a nice comparison as to where the money's coming in and where it's going out in relation. And then we draw this little line here and just show that there's a deficit, that 87 billion pound deficit. Spending, we've already talked about that in a bit of detail, but that's just explaining what we already discussed there. And then this is the really interesting part of the presentation now, the last couple of slides. So deficits and surpluses, not surprisingly, most governments run a deficit each year. In other words, they spend more than they take in. Very rare that there's a surplus. The deficit in 2021 was absolutely huge because of COVID. So they paid out, obviously, for furlough, billions and billions of pounds. And you can see that's mentioned there. So public sector net debt is what we're interested in here, and roughly it's projected to be in 2028-29 that around £3.1 trillion will be the debt, which will be equivalent to £104,000 per household. So let's just look at that finally in summary. This year, 87 billion is going to be added to the national debt. Forecast for 28-29 is going to be £3.1 trillion of debt, or 3,000 billion, or the equivalent of 104,000 per UK household. That's the little slide that we're seeing for this year in terms of the income and spend and deficit. That's what we projected to owe, and I've just built it up there as 3 blocks of 1,000 billion pounds, which is a trillion, so that's a 3.1 trillion. And at the top there, this year, we're going to add that 87 billion at the top. So there's the picture for you. That's how it all works in summary. The receipts, and you saw where the receipts come from. The spending, which you saw spending comes from. In terms of national income, the government takes about 40% of everything that everyone earns. So in taxes, so your savings on your savings and investments, your income tax, your VAT, your national insurance contributions, corporation tax, council tax, etc., car tax, fuel duty tax, all goes into that pot. Spend it on healthcare, social services, defence, etc. But there's always a deficit, and the deficit gets added to an already huge pot of 3.1 trillion pounds. That's it. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for listening.